Welcome, everyone. This is December 26th, 2021. We are almost near the end of the year. And now I see a Facebook page in front of me for all of us. Yes, we are near the end of the year. We want to welcome all of you to this next session of Advent and Divine Justice. And my note is telling me that we are on session number 22. We are on session number 22 today, and we are moving on to review and read paragraphs 47 through 50. We left off, I believe, on paragraph 48, and we're going to continue from reviewing and reading to hopefully getting to paragraph 50 today. With that being said, we want to start always with our prayer that we begin with, our opening prayer. This will be the prayer for the Bahá'ís of the Southern States, and Amira has volunteered, so I'll move aside.
Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the host of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha.
All right, so we left off on paragraph 49. So this is slide 11, huh? I thought we were slide 22 was next. But let's review first. Let's go back to the beginning. If you could go to slide 4, I believe. Slide 4. So just rehash the introduction to these paragraphs. The beloved guardian addresses in greater detail the requirements of a chaste and holy life and describes specific applications of the moral standards of modesty, purity, temperance, decency, and clean-mindedness. Shoghi Effendi also cites a number of statements from His Holiness Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha on the nature and implications of a chaste and holy life. In paragraph 50, the Baha'i writings, the Advent Divine Justice, the beloved guardian emphasizes that high moral standards expected in the teachings of the faith should not be confused with any form of asceticism or of excessive and bigoted Puritanism. Sorry about that. We're not to confuse it with any form of asceticism or of excessive and bigoted Puritanism. So let me define asceticism. Define asceticism. It is severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. So Shoghi Effendi says that the teachings of the faith do not inculcate severe self-discipline. They do not inculcate this severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. So this is not the case here, and the faith does not promote excessive and bigoted Puritanism, hence why the need for this moderation. Now, that being said, and reminding ourselves that there is this balance, that this asceticism is not to be confused with our faith, let's move on to this next paragraph that Jeremiah had pulled up, paragraph 49. So we had finished 48, you're saying, Jeremiah.
I think so.
Scott, do you remember this part of 48 right here? Just pulling your like, of course we did it. All right, slide number 9, like you were on. Let's just follow that. Slide 10. Let's follow up with that just to cover it for now. They that follow their lusts and corrupt inclinations, is yet another warning, have erred and dissipated their efforts. They indeed are of the lost. It behooves the people of Baha, he has also written, to die to the world and all that is therein, to be so detached from all earthly things, that the inmates of paradise may inhale from their garment the sweet-smelling savor of sanctity. They that have tarnished the fair name of the cause of God by following the things of the flesh, these are in palpable error. Purity and chastity, he particularly admonishes, have been and still are the most great ornaments for the handmaidens of God. God is my witness. The brightness of the light of chastity sheddeth its illumination upon the worlds of the spirit, and its fragrance is wafted even unto the most exalted paradise. God, he again affirms, hath verily made chastity to be a crown for the heads of his handmaidens. Great is the blessedness of that handmaiden that hath attained unto this great station. If you could go to slide 10, and Soresh, you could read that.
We verily have decreed in our book is his assurance, a goodly and bountiful reward to whosoever will turn away from wickedness and lead a chaste and godly life. He in truth is the great giver, the all-bountiful. We have sustained the weight of all calamities, he testifies, to sanctify you from all earthly corruption, and ye are yet indifferent. We verily behold your actions. If we perceive from them the sweet-smelling savor of purity and holiness, we will most certainly bless you. Then will the tongues of the inmates of paradise utter your praise and magnify your names amidst them who have drawn nigh unto God.
All right. So now we move on to this new paragraph. If Soresh, you could read this. This is where we're starting paragraph 49.
The drinking of wine, writes Abdul Baha, is according to the text of the most holy book forbidden, for it is the cause of chronic diseases, weakeneth the nerves, and consumeth the mind. Drink ye, O handmaidens of God, Baha'u'llah himself has affirmed, the mystic wine from the cup of my words. Cast away then from you that which your minds abhor, for it hath been forbidden unto you in his tablets and his scriptures. Beware lest ye barter away the river that is life indeed, for that which the souls of the pure-hearted detest. Become ye intoxicated with the wine of the love of God, and not with that which deadeneth your minds, O ye that adorn him. Verily, it hath been forbidden unto every believer, whether man or woman. Thus hath the sun of my commandment shone forth above the horizon of my utterance, that the handmaidens who believe in me may be illumined. It must be remembered, however, that the maintenance of such a high standard of moral conduct is not to be associated or confused with any form of asceticism or of excessive and bigoted Puritanism. The standard inculcated by Baha'u'llah seeks under no circumstances to deny anyone the legitimate right and privilege to derive the fullest advantage and benefit from the manifold joys, beauties, and pleasures with which the world has been so plentifully enriched by an all-loving creator. Should a man, Baha'u'llah himself reassures us, wish to adorn himself with the ornaments of the earth, to wear its apparels, or partake of the benefits it can bestow, no harm can befall him, if he alloweth nothing whatever to intervene between him and God. For God hath ordained every good thing, whether created in the heavens or in the earth, for such of his servants as truly believe in him. Eat ye, O people, of the good things which God hath allowed you, and deprive not yourselves from his wondrous bounties. Render thanks and praise unto him, and be of them that are truly thankful.
All right. So now we are on the major key points from paragraph 47 through 50. The moral standards defined in the Baha'i faith include guidelines for their application to one's life. Frivolous conduct is a lack of seriousness in one's behavior, and any form of creative work produced to promote and sell sexual pleasure and immorality represents the prostitution of arts and literature. If we can move on. Companionate marriage is a trial marriage in which the partners postpone having children until a decision is made to stay married. Otherwise, they can be divorced by mutual consent. Infidelity in a marriage means that one of the partners engages in an intimate and sexual relationship with someone outside the marriage, and promiscuity represents the practice of engaging in indiscriminate, intimate, and sexual relationships with different partners. All of these things are spoken of by Shoghi Effendi, and specifically he spoke of companionate marriage as well. That is something that's important to consider, all these points, as it relates to the text we just read over the course of paragraphs 47 through 50. If you could move on. So easy familiarity in the form of indiscriminate kissing and embracing involving unrelated people of opposite sexes is not desirable and is discouraged. This easy familiarity is really hard to explain, as it was mentioned by Shoghi Effendi in the passages. What is that? It is in the form of indiscriminate kissing and embracing involving unrelated people of opposite sexes, and that is not desirable. So it says it here to quote. So sexual vices are habits that are considered diversions to a natural expression of the sex impulse. And Baha'u'llah explicitly states that living in seclusion or practicing asceticism is not acceptable in the presence of God. So where you have all of these definitions we provided, where Shoghi Effendi is saying that we need to distinguish ourselves from our society and not engage in these behaviors, Baha'u'llah explicitly states that living in seclusion or practicing asceticism is not acceptable in the presence of God. And the definition of asceticism, it's just to say it in my own words, since we've already said the definition from the dictionary, it is where we are being from the side of moderation that we're trying to attain by avoiding these things, avoiding everything. We're not supposed to avoid everything. We're supposed to partake of the bounties of this world. We're supposed to enjoy the fruits of this world and not just to stay away from everything, but it's a matter of doing things the right way. It's about doing things at the right time and caring about the effects of our actions on other people. As we discussed in the previous section, the concept of caring about the actions that we commit to actually take. So if I do something, I'm thinking about my effects on my brothers and sisters around me, what my actions mean for my brothers and sisters around me, those that are a part of my human family, not just my blood relatives, but everyone. If you could go to the next slide. So if we could have Rose or Scott to read this.
I can do it because I'm on mute.
Okay. Scott?
And the remainder of paragraph 47, not included in our last section, the beloved guardian describes specific application of the moral standards of modesty, purity, temperance, decency, and clean-mindedness. This should be understood against the backdrop of the increasing forces of irreligion and the acceleration of moral decay with their impact on all facets of human life.
So what do we think about this, what it means? Can someone help elaborate? Scott or Soros or Rose, Amira? So let me better ask the question. How is the guardian juxtaposing the moral standards that Baha'is are to follow with the world around us? How do they juxtapose against one another?
Yeah, I think mainly we're talking about like chastity. This is the section that's talking about chastity here. And I know that the guardian tries to emphasize that our standards of chastity are in complete, they're like, what's the word? It's like diametrically opposed or something with like the, just the ways of life that people are embracing in our current society. And I know that we need to, in order to, be able to teach the faith, we need to kind of lead by example. And I think, I don't know, it's one of these paragraphs, but it talks about how, every aspect of chastity stands, in opposition with, it will show the perversity and the way that these current ways of life are not healthy and conducive to divine justice and to a world order, a unified world order. And I'm trying to find that quote, but it might take a second. But yeah, this is all about chastity.
While
Interesting.
you're finding that quote, Scott, would you like to also describe it?
Yeah, it's interesting for me to think. I was born in 55, so this was 17 years before I was even born, that he was identifying the moral standards were, that in my parents, if you would say, maybe your grandparents were declining into, and with the idea that there was a lot of rebellion against the moral standards that were put on by different faiths. And so even at that time, let alone in my lifetime, how much more degradation or decline has been in the moral standards, and it puts religious individuals into a part where you have to stand up for these standards and set limits, which is not something that youth and young people who ultimately become old people and have a they like to push back, and maybe because their own parents and grandparents have pushed back at times. So it's something that it affects our moral life when it comes, and we don't even take ourselves in. When we take ourselves into account, we think of how these may have affected the days, our keeping these standards or breaking these standards in our personal life may have had a difference in our daily life. If we take myself into account tonight, how could I think about the things that have affected my life this past day? Sometimes they're long-term effects, and sometimes they're just short-term. But we need to keep these and review our standards. Yep. Sharush may have had something else.
Yeah. So continuing on from that, I honestly, it's just something I found from the same paragraph where the Guardian's talking about our standard of a chaste and holy life. And the Guardian says that this can tolerate no compromise with the theories, the standards, the habits, and the excesses of a decadent age. Nay, rather, it seeks to demonstrate through the dynamic force of its example the pernicious character of such theories, the falsity of such standards, the hollowness of such claims, the perversity of such habits, and the sacrilegious character of such excesses. So currently, I think in our current world, there's a lot of forces trying to prove the validity of these things, these things that are in reality, perverse habits, sacrilegious excesses, these examples, pernicious theories, pernicious character of such theories. So there's a lot of forces trying to kind of demonstrate the validity of, and there's a lot of people trying to embrace these things and show that they're acceptable and they're not contrary to morality, and they're not contrary to good health. So this is just, I feel like the paragraph in and of itself, I think, is just really well worded, and it's just a really by itself, I think it's a really well written paragraph.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And how can people find that now, what you just referred to? Like, is it
So I think it's just paragraph 47, based on what this says. It's right, actually, I think it's right where we are reading. It's the paragraph that starts, such a chaste and holy life. So you can find it in this, there's a bunch of paragraphs on chastity, which we've just covered. And it's right there at the end of that, right before we get into racial prejudice, right before we get into these quotes. And then he goes, as to racial prejudice.
Very good. And that actually, racial prejudice, we'll be bringing that up in our next session, session 23.
All
So
right.
we're going to be right on track for that after today. That's our goal, at least.
Great.
So now everyone's gotten some exposure to this. If we go to the next slide, please. We have something a little more in depth. The beloved guardian describes these increasing forces of a religion in one of his letters. The recrudescence of religious intolerance, of racial animosity, and of patriotic arrogance, the increasing evidences of selfishness, of suspicion, of fear, and of fraud, the spread of terrorism. Imagine, this is terrorism, the term brought up only like 100 years ago, before it became a modern term everyone uses to describe the modern state of affairs of terrorism, of lawlessness, of drunkenness, and of crime, the unquenchable thirst for and the feverish pursuit after the earthly vanities, riches, and pleasures, the weakening of family solidarity, the laxity in parental control, the lapse into luxurious indulgence, the irresponsible attitude towards marriage, and the consequent rising tide of divorce, the degeneracy of art and music, the infection of literature, and the corruption of the press, the extension of the influence and activities of those prophets of decadence who influence, and activities of those prophets of decadence who advocate companionate marriage. Remember, we brought up companionate marriage, the definition, where you try it out, the marriage, to see if it's okay, and then maybe you have a baby, who preach the philosophy of Nudism, who call modesty an intellectual fiction, who refuse to regard the procreation of children as the sacred and primary purpose of marriage, who denounce religion as an opiate of the people, who would, if given free rein, lead back the human race to barbarism, chaos, and ultimate extinction. These appear as the outstanding characteristics of a decadent society, a society that must either be reborn or perish. Now, the definition on the right for decadent society: decadence is moral or cultural decline as characterized by excessive indulgence in pleasure or luxury. Having just said all this, and having reviewed a little bit in the last slide, what do we think now?
I also wanted to define recrudescence because I needed to for myself, and that is the recurrence of an undesirable condition. So in the second line, the recrudescence of religious intolerance means the recurrence of an undesirable condition. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question though.
Well, no, that was important. You brought this up. Very good to bring that up. I completely forgot to define that, and I didn't know what it means. I don't know if people know what it means here, but I don't think the majority of us do. So that was very important. You brought that up. Could you say that definition one more time, if you don't mind? Recrudescence.
The recurrence of an undesirable condition.
So the recurrence of an undesirable condition of religious intolerance, of racial animosity, and of patriotic arrogance. So it's saying the recurrence of these things. And really the recurrence of all these things connected by the commas up to the semicolon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So to delve deeper into this is actually answering the question I asked anyway. What else are we getting from this? Because that was important. What else are we getting from this paragraph?
I just wanted to shout out a great video related to Baha'i marriage, and that is 5 Myths. I think it's by Dr. Noura Mozoon, and it's a 25-minute YouTube video, or it's really a talk that she gave. And I found it to be very enlightening, and it is very relevant to this discussion, I feel. Because it talks about, when you were talking about this companionate marriage and all that, and I think she really covers these things. But it's 5 myths on love and marriage, and a lot of these topics are discussed.
If you could please comment it on the video, the one that's being recorded, we could definitely all benefit from it. Or, of course, send it here. But it's a difficulty when people ask and what they watch the recording of finding it. So saying it in the comments may be easier. But I think that's very valuable to share that, because I haven't heard of all things. The topic A, didn't know that existed, the talk, and also the name of the person. I couldn't really understand.
I will link it. It's by Dr. Noura Mozoon, who's a Baha'i who specializes in marriages and this subject. So I'll share it once the video is posted.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
So actually, could you share some more, maybe that you might have some more gems you might be able to share with us?
Honestly, that's what came to mind mainly, but it was very good. I mean, briefly I can try and summarize, but several studies were kind of cited in this talk, but she talked about these myths really that people are starting to embrace, and this fallacy of having to engage in sexual relations in order to find out whether people are compatible in a relationship. And this is entirely a myth, and it is best, according to the talk, research has shown that following these, what is advised in the Baha'i writings is the most healthy approach to take with relationships. Another myth that she talked about is the myth of having to, I think the word is cohabitate, or just living together before marriage. That's another thing that people think that they have to do in order to get along in a marriage, and that's another fallacy. And she talks about another, how that's also incorrect. It's research has shown that the more successful relationships are ones where people waited until marriage in order to move in together, really. So those are just a couple.
One moment though, with companionate marriage, it's a little different, which I didn't understand this until reading. Like, companionate marriage isn't the idea of not being married and having someone to live with before marriage. The idea of companionate marriage is that you get married, and before you decide to have children, you work it out to see if you want to remain married. So it's could we go back please a couple slides? It's not something that I'm also familiar with, because yes, companionate marriage is a trial marriage in which the partners postpone having children until a decision is made to stay married. Otherwise, they can be divorced by mutual consent.
Yeah,
that's something that I was not exposed to per se. Like, I'm just learning too myself.
Yeah. No, I wasn't aware of that either. But the video goes, into a lot of these different things. It delves into a number of different myths that people are trying to learn about.
And it's actually interesting though, Soros, because in America we have, in America, not every other country in the world, because I don't know, but at least in America, I know that some states you have this concept of common law marriage. And a common law marriage isn't a typical marriage. It's one that is assumed pretty much. So you never really got married with the government's giving you a license and whatnot. You're married because of a wave of the wand in the law that they give you practically a marriage for that purpose. So like some people have, even with the way laws are being made in America, in some places they have given unique rights to people to try to go around the concept of having a marriage. So where a marriage would be the contract between you and your spouse, and you own property together, they're devising different means to still own property together but not be married. And it's very confusing. I just have to say that it's very confusing, because although someone can say, oh, it can be done, it's not a matter of can it be done, it's a matter of is it right to do it. And that's in principle the idea of where these moral standards come in, because where one can say, is it okay or is it not okay, from the concept of our opinions, there's this moral standard that is not something that you and I are per se deciding, but it's something that's for our own good. And it's something that we can recognize that there are positive consequences to this, be it that we have to, for example, wait before we get married to do things, and after we get married to not stop some natural things from happening as well. So it's a bit of everything, right?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard of the common law marriage, is it called? I had never heard of that.
Yeah, so if I look up the term common law marriage just for a definition from online. So I'm gonna this is common law marriage by state per se. Common law marriage is allowed in a minority of states. A common law marriage is a legally recognized marriage between two people who have not purchased a marriage license or had their marriage solemnized by a ceremony. Not all states have statutes addressing common law marriage. In some states, case law and public policy determine validity. So you have different states such as Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah. They all have different interpretations on this. But there's also states that previously allowed common law marriage. For example, where I'm from in Florida, you have no common law entered into after January 1st, 1968 to be allowed. So before 1968, you could have a common law marriage per se, but now Florida doesn't allow it, though it used to. So you have different changing trends depending on if, I guess, the government officials think it's
John,
propitious.
John, are we talking about Bahá'í law, or are we talking about everyday life? Because if you know everyday law,
there's a difference
don't
between the
care
two.
about.
We're talking about the
Focus-
differences between the
focus on
two.
Bahá'í law.
Yes, but to know the benefits and to understand why it exists, we have to know the difference. What are we comparing it to? So
Sure.
the point is that where people think that it's okay, especially in our society today, people think it's okay to have a situation that's not very clear. The essence of why I said this was that if we really want to benefit ourselves and our communities around us, if we're thinking about our human brothers and sisters, a part of this human family that we all share, we have to be considerate as to the effects of our actions when we're acting according to how we feel. Also thinking about how other people feel after our actions have been completed, or if what we do doesn't really work out like we planned in the beginning. Just because someone feels a certain way about someone, it doesn't justify their actions per se, especially if they're going to affect other people around them with their actions. And that could be, for example, the concept of a marriage. When you're going to bond with someone for your life through a marriage, you need to be also thinking about the concept of having children. And then also before that, not having children and so forth. These are the rules that we have to follow for our own good. That's the premise. And I was explaining that governments have brought out some concepts that, for example, common law marriage being one of them, they're trying to make sense of the chaos. And what I'm saying is that with these moral laws that we're given in the Baha'i writings, this avoids all of these things that are not really coherent. And the reason we don't do them that much is because they don't work. And that's the whole principle. And though one could say it works, because anyone can watch this and say, well, I think a common law marriage is fine. Someone may say that. The point is that this is not what's considered moral. And that's the difference between doing whatever you want and doing something because of a moral rule that you have that is not just for your own good, but for everyone else's around you. That's the principle of what I'm saying. And the thing is that it's not a popular option to do the right thing, even if you don't feel that you want to do it. And that's the principle. It's less about our feelings, and it's more about our feelings being in harmony with our duty to ourselves and our society. To be in harmony, not to have our duty outweigh our feelings or our feelings outweigh our duty. We need to be in harmony. Yes, there's a tug, there's a push and pull, but as we try to balance the two, that's how we live a better life. Could we move to the next slide, please?
Before you go there, John, I've been looking at your definition of decadence, and a marriage where between two partners where it's been solemnized and legal and like I look at the definition, I see the excessive indulgence of pleasure or luxury, and there may be one partner that decides because of luxury or pleasure, they want to seek something outside of that one person that they've, quote, if you will, be stuck with. Or they've made a decision at one point and now they don't want to, they want to, because of other luxury or pleasures, they want to seek something else. And this is a spiritual aspect that we have to learn about our own spiritual self, that we aren't hit with that decadence, that it's the same old thing, the same old person. There's not a spark of excitement. We can find sparks and excitement in a lot of just waking up and watching the sunrise, even though we've done it thousands of times already in our life. And so this decade, I think that the materialism that comes along really has had a lot of our the different things that the Guardian set up here. It greatly negatively affects our family solidarity, definitely, if we don't have a firm commitment with one another and we decide that we can just rip up a contract or we say tomorrow I'm leaving just for nothing, and not have the patience of saying, oh, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I need to think more about this commitment that I made a long time ago. So I think what Shoghi Effendi is saying in here, ultimately the what happens to our family, the weakening of the family solidarity is weakening the society's solidarity. I don't think we had to see much outside our doors today to see that that problem's happening.
Thank you so much for that. And Jeremiah, if you could go to the next slide, I think it's good to actually talk now about these requirements now that we've gone through a little bit, we can be a little more specific as to applying these moral standards. And Amira, if you could read this.
Beloved guardians, outline specific requirements of a chaste and holy life. Moderation in dress, language, amusements, artistic and literary works, daily vigilance in the control of one's carnal desires and corrupt inclinations, the abandonment of a frivolous conduct with its excessive attachment to trivial and often misdirected pleasures, total abstinence from all alcoholic drinks, from opium and from similar habit-forming drugs, condemnation of prostitution of art and literature, the practices of Nudism and of Companionate Marriage, Infidelity in marital relationships, and all manner of promiscuity, of easy familiarity, and of sexual vices. No compromise with the theories, the standards, the habits, and the excesses of a decadent age, demonstrating through the dynamic force of its example the pernicious character of such theories, the falsity of such standards, the hollowness of such claims, the perversity of such habits, and the sacrilegious character of such excesses.
So I think that as a group, we can go over this, what we just see here, these requirements for a chaste and holy life. There's the concepts of moderation in dress, language, amusements, artistic and literary works. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have moderation, for example, in your amusements, or moderation in your artistic or your literary works? Does it mean, for example, something you write about is bad, writing about something per se is bad, or drawing something per se is bad? Or is it what we're doing it for that's bad? The logic of what we're applying to what we should and shouldn't do. So I'll take a stab at it, and I appreciate people joining in on this. It is the drawing of pornography, for example, that is, or writing erotic novels, for example, that would be not really appropriate for our artistic expression, or writing things that are for trying to incite pleasure in our lust, in our sensory, our senses that are not per se within the confines of a marriage.
I noticed that this overlaps a little bit. The artistic and literary aspect overlaps with the condemnation of the prostitution of art and literature. So that's artistic and literary. And a few slides ago, we kind of defined this prostitution of art and literature as similar to what you're saying. Things that are designed to incite pleasure as a result of, through art and through literature. So I think as for moderation in these things, I think that kind of implies, it kind of implies avoiding the prostitution of art and literature.
So does moderation in dress, for example, mean that you shouldn't dress in a suit? What does moderation in dress mean?
I think that this is a very interesting discussion, actually, because I was talking to my roommate, William, about this, and we were having this discussion. He pointed out to me that in other societies, people are close to naked sometimes, and that's considered normal. and that's not something that's shocking to people, and it's not something out of the ordinary, something that would be provocative, something I'm very unfamiliar with it, but I want to say that it depends on the society that you're living in, what that definition is, what is considered moderate in terms of dress. So I think, I'm still unfamiliar. I'm still kind of developing my own understanding of this, but I feel like moderation in our context means dressing in a way that does not, just like the prostitution of art and literature, something that does not evoke lustfulness, as you said, and it doesn't distract from. So for example, I'm in the symphony, in the Cal Poly Symphony, and as with any symphony, there's a strict dress code. You're either wearing a tux, men are wearing it black and white. The reason for this, and women are black and white, everybody's black and white. The reason for this is because if we were dressed in some other fashion, the idea is to not distract from the performance and not detract from the music and the artistic aspect of the concert. So I mean, in other like jazz concerts, sometimes you can wear like a dress, like a colored shirt, but of your choosing. You can choose whatever color you want to wear, but it's still like a dress shirt. So there's still some uniformity. There's still some everybody has some, everybody has a similar dress, so there's some consistency. But anyways, with a symphony, the idea of wearing this uniform or wearing like a tuxedo is that it's such that it doesn't detract from the music and doesn't detract from the audience's experience. So I think moderation in dress, one example of that is when you go and see a performance, there's a reason for why everybody is wearing this uniform suit and tie and tux, and that is to keep the audience's focus on what is being performed, artistically, what they're trying to enjoy. So dress can, I think, improve and the audience's experience. And just in everyday life, I think dress can help us focus on the task at hand. And it has the potential to be distracting and evoke lustfulness, and it also has the potential to facilitate, a meaningful atmosphere and meaningful discussion.
Question.
Sure.
Would you agree that as societies differ in what is considered, let's just say, sexually arousing in dress, as they differ in that even the societies that are maybe not as developed, that where there is this commonly accepted mindset that doing certain things would evoke feelings of sexual desire in another, that these would give us a standard of what's considered agreeable in not dressing a certain way?
I'm sure there is, but me being wholly unfamiliar with most of the world, most societies other than the one I'm living in, I can't tell you what that commonality would be, what the commonly accepted.
No, it's not about a commonality. It's about a common theme, not a commonality in the actual dress. So in other words, in essence, if I go to a country where for whatever reason, as it relates to men, not women, but as it relates to men, where I'm dressing myself a certain way. If I were to, for example, wear shorts and I don't wear pants, for some reason, if I just wear shorts like I do normally in America, as is considered not arousing to people in this country, if I go to a country that it is to people, I think that it's my duty as a matter of moderation in my dress to be considerate and not wear shorts, to only wear pants. And as it relates to that culture, especially where I would be evoking unwanted feelings in people ultimately, and these thoughts that I don't want to evoke in others, I would then moderate how I dress.
I completely agree. Actually, speaking of shorts, this is something that I hadn't considered. I'm in a professional setting. We all know that shorts are not typically worn, not considered typically professional, not appropriate for that type of setting. And speaking of shorts, I myself don't wear shorts often, but one thing I hadn't considered is during prayer, a lot of people, you wouldn't want to pray when you're not dressed modestly. You wouldn't want to pray. It's as though you're in the presence of God. So when you're saying your obligatory prayer or whatever it may be, one thing that recently came to my attention is that I want to say at least Arab men who might be wearing shorts, or I don't know if it's just Arab men or if it's just Muslims in general, but they have, if they're in the event that they're wearing shorts, there is like a covering that you put around your waist and it covers the rest of your legs for prayer. And this is something that I have a Muslim friend who asked me if I use this, if I'm wearing shorts. And of course I don't wear shorts much, but I told her it wasn't really something I'd considered, but definitely I would, I believe in moderation of dress when you're praying. And so this kind of covering, it's like a skirt looking thing. I think it's worn by Arab men, and this was unfamiliar to me. But when wearing shorts, this is something that people are more conscious of than I realized, especially during prayer. So I think that's a good thing that you brought up on shorts, because I think that's something to consider when you want to be dressed modestly. Then I think shorts are less modest for sure.
I mean, ultimately, I wonder if there is a Baha'i society that evolves into the future, how clothing will be. I really wonder how it will be, because there's this quote from Baha'u'llah, which I think was cited here as well, where if you walk through a valley of gold, you won't think about the gold. If you gaze on the fairest woman's face, you're not going to feel attraction to her because of her face. And that should be, I think, an important litmus test for our own personal moral standards. So there's this difference between us having the duty to maintain our own resolute nature, our own moral rectitude of conduct. And then there's, on the other side, how we relate with those in our society. When we go with our society members, we want to be what would be called moderate in their understanding, by their standards. So I'm sorry, I had to sniff there. It's a matter of a affirmative duty to act for us than it is more of a preventative measure. It's an affirmative duty for us to be mindful of others.
But if you remember, when we went to Haifa, Israel, for pilgrimage, we had Africans coming from Africa. They didn't have that much money, but they knew how to dress themselves when they come to visit God. When they were in pilgrimage, they had the most expensive clothing they had in their body. So as you, and so as me, and so as Daddy. When we go to any Baha'i meetings, every Baha'i should have a proper clothing. So because when you go to a meeting that is a Baha'i meeting, it means God is present at that moment. And especially for Baha'i youth, Baha'i adults, Baha'i children, they should be dressed properly, that when a Baha'i walks into a meeting that is not a Baha'i, they know this person is a Baha'i from their way that they are clothing, from the way they present themselves. You don't go with a leotard to go to feast. You don't go with a leotard to go to a meeting. And unfortunately, in America, some people, they think it's normal. And that's not normal in any society, John.
That's called athleisure. That's a current fashion trend. Athleisure. It's athletic leisure clothing.
Yes, but they forget who they are. They forget their hereditary, where they come from. If somebody has a conscience, in all times, when they dress themselves properly. That's all. Because it's indirectly teaching that I am a Baha'i.
Thank you for your input on this. And as it relates to the rest of this passage, the rest of this list, we have this concept of daily vigilance in the control of one's carnal desires and corrupt inclinations. We have this concept in America where you have like a dichotomy is created where it's either the society is shaming someone in how they dress and not punishing the person who commits a bad act in relation to, let's just say, the modern explanation is when you have a rape that occurs, that some people may say things that are very inappropriate about this heinous act. The Baha'i position on this is that we're both to moderate how we dress, and we're supposed to control our carnal desires and our corrupt inclinations. So that means that obviously one who commits a heinous act of, for say, rape is committing a crime and they need to be punished for that crime. So you have on one end that we have to moderate how we dress, and in another end, we have to very, very, very keenly control how we act towards other people, not committing an unwanted touching to someone who doesn't want an unwanted touching. So if someone does not want to be touched, you don't touch them. Very clear. That is something that is a law in the United States, but it is also, as a matter of Baha'i principle, the thoughts that are in our heads, we need to control our carnal desires and our corrupt inclinations. So I don't need to elaborate on people thinking of things that are not appropriate. I think this is something clear. If someone is sexually aroused by another human being, they should control that. And as it relates to the moderation of dress as well, we should control that. So it's a twofold process. One side is not guilt-free. Everyone has to be vigilant in taking care of how they act in a society with other people. I wanted to point that out. And lastly, of course, substance abuse or substance period. Substance period is substance abuse. So abstinence from all alcoholic drinks, opium, and from similar habit-forming drugs. Having it period is substance abuse. Not having too much is any. That is the Baha'i definition of substance abuse, having any alcoholic drinks, as if it's not for a medicinal use, obviously. And that would be a very, very unique situation that is not covered here because we're talking about recreational use. That being stated, it's important to also add that substance abuse leads to all these other things we may have discussed, such as rape. So if we want to avoid these bad things from happening, we need to avoid giving people a license to do it first, which is unacceptable in a society, and barring the means by which people modern day say, oh, it was this. It's not the alcohol, because there should be no alcohol. That's the idea. and I think where our society has this moral dilemma, which we are clear about in our society, where there is the subject of blame the person, not the substance. They talk about gun control, blame the person, not the gun. For example, they'll say that, or blame the guns, not the people. If they don't have the guns, then they won't go shoot people. The Baha'i logic is very clear that you need to, on both ends, control it. That means people should avoid using substances that hurts other people, aka alcohol, opium, other similar habit-forming drugs. And B, not just avoiding that, they should not commit a bad act under any circumstance anyway. So by this logic, there's no excuse to perform certain bad acts that would be normally attributed to drug abuse or normally attributed to, sadly, in the older world societies, they would say that because how someone dressed is why they committed the bad act. That somehow someone dressing a certain way leads to them being raped. That is also morally wrong. It is inappropriate to ever blame someone else's act for your ultimate own act. That being said, could we move to the next slide, please? So specific requirements of a chaste and holy life. Rose, you haven't read today. If you're willing to, would you like to read? And if Rose doesn't unmute, Payam, would you like to read?
You want me to read?
Yes.
1 second.
This is specific requirements of a chaste and holy life.
Will they fall off if I read it? Or can I just say my joke went way over people's heads there?
You're funny. So it starts with moderation in dress, language and amusements, artistic and literary works, which we just
you read it.
addressed. We just addressed the first topic, Payam. Moderation in dress, language and amusements, artistic and literary works, describing the affirmative duty that Baha'is have to both control themselves and also to be agreeable per the standards of their society as it relates to moderation. But applying Baha'i moderation is a whole other thing that's going to develop, I suppose, in the future as we understand what it means to be a Baha'i as a society, as we're still trying to do that. We're trying to learn what it means to be a Baha'i.
Moderation is universal. But if you want to talk about Baha'i moderation, Baha'u'llah says, seek ye the middle way, which is remembrance of me and of your futures. That's what Baha'i moderation can be kind of interpreted as.
The middle way, which is remembrance of me and what?
And and your future, basically your I am there, your future. And so that's the laws of, that means the laws of the faith, being steadfast in the faith, because the laws of each faith is moderation in itself. The writings is moderation, which is what it really ultimately comes down to.
So Soros quoted something. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. You want me to read it? Lament not in your hours of trial, neither rejoice therein. Seek ye the middle way, which is a remembrance of me in your afflictions and reflection over that which may befall you in the future. Thus informeth you he who is omniscient, he who is aware. That's from the Kitab Abbas.
Just think about this. Reflection over that which may befall you in the future. So reflection is usually after something that occurs. But when you reflect over that which may befall you in the future, you're reflecting on what exactly?
Well, the consequences of your actions, really. So it's It's to do with what's going to happen in the future based on your current actions and what's going to happen in the next life, essentially. Because there's a hidden word that talks about
Yeah.
being summoned to a reckoning, and this is very
But
much
being more immediate, let's be a little more immediate with this. Immediately, if I dress a certain way, what are people going to react to it? Not per se, do I look glamorous? Do I look handsome or beautiful? It's about how will people think in terms of my moderation? Am I living the way that I should be living ultimately beforehand?
Yeah, so think about your choices before you take them. Reflect on that. So if you decide, if you're in a situation where you might break a law, think about what would happen. Think about the consequences and so on and so forth. And I think that's what it comes down to.
I think that would block a lot of illegal activity, wouldn't it?
That's the point of moderation, yeah.
So the second point, daily vigilance.
Well, daily vigilance in the control of one's carnal desires. So yeah, that follows on from controlling yourself. Don't eat too much. Don't feel like
Gluttony.
The all kind of animalistic desires that we have. The carnal, the eating, the sexual, the what else is there? Sleeping. Don't sleep too much.
That's difficult, and I mean, it's hard to find people who sleep too much. I haven't met that person yet.
Really? It's very common.
I have not met many people that sleep a lot. Usually people that I meet are trying to survive, and they're trying to sleep more because they don't have enough.
Well, that's a better situation to be in, I guess.
You agree? It's a better situation?
Yeah, because you can do more with your life. Anyway.
You hear that, Jeremiah? You can do more with your life when you don't sleep.
Jeremiah's.
Are you just going to call me out? All right. So we ready to move on?
Jeremiah?
No, Jeremiah doesn't sleep enough.
Jeremiah wasn't sleeping.
Oh, he was just sleeping now?
Yeah, can you not tell by his eyes? Anyway. Okay, so the other ones are the abandonments of frivolous conduct, which is flagrancy, essentially. Total abstinence from all alcoholic drinks, opium, and habit forming. So no drugs, no alcohol. There's another law, but there's also a reason for that, right? So we abstain from this stuff because it's harmful to our bodies. Anything that alters the mind and our thought process is generally forbidden. So no compromise with the theories, the standards, the habits, and the excess of a decadent age. So yeah, we shouldn't compromise with the way society is today. We have to adhere completely to the standards of the faith. That's what it's trying to say. Is that okay? If they want to drink, let them drink. We'll just continue with our study circles. We've got to give them a bit of leeway at least. But no, the standard is the standards, and this is what it's saying. That we shouldn't compromise anything really, and just aim as high as we can, strive to achieve that. Condemnation of prostitution of art and literature, nudism, companionate marriage, infidelity, promiscuity, easy familiarity, and sexual vices. So all the nitty-gritty stuff, we see how perverted entertainment's become in today's society. All the lyrics are about, whatever very superficial, very sexual lyrics, very there's a lot of perversity in art today and literature. Companionate marriage. So there's the concept of muta in Shia Islam, which is a temporary marriage, and this is for the sole purpose, which is essentially in Iran, it's a form of prostitution. So it becomes a way of legalizing that kind of work, or that kind of, and people, it's also, people do it as well to see if they like a person or not. But the point is, marriage is meant to be an eternal thing, as the writings say. And then demonstrating through the dynamic force of example, the pernicious character of such theories, the falsity of such standards, the hollowness of such claims, the perversity of such habits, and the sacrilegious character of such excesses. So we're basically calling out the wrong in society by leading by example, I guess. I think that's the context. I don't know what the context is. That leading on from the previous? So we have to demonstrate a chaste and holy life, and we have to bring to light of the standard of today, which is not really acceptable, by being ourselves a kind of example of these writings. Surish's moderation in appearance is very much appreciated. Let's see, Shay. I just decided to speak while I'm reading. I hope that was okay.
I don't see sound. What did you say?
What did you what?
What?
Did you mute your sound? So you decided not to listen to it.
No, I'm joking.
You weren't joking. I know you muted yourself.
Oh, okay. You just
Anyway.
threw out. So, what do you think?
I said I'd finished reading, and
what do you think about this last quote?
well, if your sound was unmuted, you would have heard what I said about it.
No, I meant like, sorry, the group. Like, having read what Payam went through, what do you think of this last quote?
You can ask the others.
Because pernicious. We all know what pernicious means. Define pernicious. Pernicious is having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. I think it's important to make a point that through the dynamic force of its example, the pernicious, this subtle character, it's a harmful, subtle character of such theories, the falsity of such standards, the hollowness of such claims, the perversity of such habits, and the sacrilegious character of such excesses. So, having grown up in this society, I have understood that there's this, oh, well, it's no harm if this person does that. It's no harm that they do this, pretty much allowing for an act to take place that may really be circumventing the authority of a parent. It may be circumventing the authority of really any authority figure that's involved in saying not to do something, and then they're undercut by someone saying, well, let's let it slide, let's do this. I think that it's an important point to express this pernicious character of the activities that we have going on in our society, that we understand this is happening around us, but as Baha'is that are trying to really maintain a rectitude of conduct, there's moderation, yes, but there also is this concept of doing things the right way for the right reasons. So for example, where Baha'is are supposed to follow the law of consultation, that is where we consult on things and make changes and do things because we've consulted. And we also consult the writings as well as we consult. But in the concept of giving into a lot of these excesses around us without really consulting about things, but just like an erosion process, water just erodes away rock. Like us, our morality is that rock, and we let the water erode us away. Ultimately, you're not going to have any rock left. And you don't really recognize it happening because it's slow, it's subtle, and it's without what seems to be immediate effect. But there are effects to it. And I'm not using the idea of a slippery slope. It's not that it per se snowballs into something bigger. It's just something you don't really notice. It's not something that's as noticeable. So it's important to make it clear that there is this cooperation between being on one side in moderation and trying to still enjoy the things of the world, and in another side being out of moderation and trying to do too much. And we know these things when they happen to us. For example, you'll know when someone gets something for the first time, they love it so much, they just do that, only that, and they neglect their family, they neglect everyone around them. That is not moderation, where you neglect your duties and the people around you. It's not just committing to having fun. You're doing something and you're indulging in it. And there's a very clear definition of doing too much that readily your friends and your family around you can help you to see and understand if you're only willing. And that's the point here. It's that you have these things that can be actually very clear in their effect, but to you, it's not very clear. And that's where talking about it with people, how you affect other people, how you're affecting ultimately everyone around you, that helps you to know if you're doing something the right way. And of course, just because people say something doesn't mean it's right. So you have to use your own rational mind and continuously have daily vigilance in the control of one's carnal desires. So all of these things come and they work together. Could you move to the next slide, please?
Just back one more thing, John. This is where when one pushes back and says it has these standards and tries to hold these higher standards, one can be easily, the pushback from that can be that these are bigoted, puritanical standards. I say that because I've had those, at least the puritanical standards that I was trying to keep put out or expressed to me that way. So it's interesting that, and yet, the pernicious character isn't seen. It's just like you're saying. It's one drink, or it's just one of these things that you don't see very much problem with that once or twice, but until it becomes an indulgence, then we can see that. But we can't see that very often. A lot of people can't see it and see that it's very puritanical not to have these standards that are set before us in the writings and by brought to a together by the Shoghi Effendi in these paragraphs.
Well, there is such a thing as doing something too much. So just because we have these standards, it doesn't mean that people can't misinterpret them. And you can see the result of misinterpretation when, for example, someone were to do something that by Baha'i standards would be extreme. So it's extremely important to, if there's any extreme, it's the importance of being reflective, of reflecting on the actions one commits to. So just because you're probably going to get criticisms, like you just said, of having puritanical standards of asceticism, you could be criticized for that. You still need to, I think, you need to ask yourself if you are doing just that, what you're being criticized of, because it is possible that in your attempt to follow the law that you're actually not doing what the law intended.
Sure.
John, please know that, please think about, you're going to an appointment, going to your office, and you are an attorney, and you decide to go with bathing suit into your office. Do you think that's appropriate behavior?
I've seen John do it before. So.
John?
I don't hear her. Your sound quality is very bad.
You said you went
Sure,
to
sorry,
bathe.
madam.
You
Okay,
said
Coral.
you go to your
I'm
office
saying
with
that
a
you're an
bathing suit.
attorney. Okay?
I don't need you
You're
repeating
an
that part.
Yes. And you decide to go with your bathing suit to the
Oh,
office.
bathing suit. Okay.
Bathing
Bathing
suit.
suit.
To go to the office and say, I'm an attorney. Do you think people in your office will respect you the same?
Thank
I've
you
seen
for
him do
a
it
clear
before.
example.
So that's why we cannot say moderation. There is no extreme and there is no moderation. The law that Baha'u'llah brought in Kitab al-Aqdas is already concrete, and we have to follow. And we have to see that if I am going to a certain place, for example, I'm going beach on a boat, on a bathing suit. When I come out of the boat, we should have something to put on. You don't go with your bathing suit into the area. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up to you, John, is that some of the, unfortunately, that's why I brought it up many times to National Spiritual Assembly, is some of the Bahá'ís, they forget. And what they do in the social media, they have pictures or they're posting stuff that is inappropriate. So you may think that we have to wear right clothing when we go out, but they do the same thing as I mentioned to you, going to the office wearing bathing suit. They do the same thing in the social media. And guess whose social media watch that? All the enemies of the faith, the Bahá'ís that are in Iran that are getting killed, they use this kind of media against the Bahá'ís in Iran. They're going to use it against everybody, or the good Bahá'ís that are around. What it is, that is not a good standard. So social media, when we are discussing things in LinkedIn, in Facebook, in any other social feature, we have to be careful how we speak and how we present ourselves in that social platform, because that social platform is going to be seen by everyone else in the whole planet.
What you brought up is important. It's important you brought up the idea that we need to take care of our public image, that as you would in the context of meeting someone in a formal circumstance, you would also take care on your social media posts to not share stuff that is unseemly. That is agreed, and that is not something I think a lot of people think about. Thank you for sharing that. If we could move to the next slide, please, Jeremiah.
To add to that, I think, there's many people from all kinds of religions. They have this problem with social media. I think it's a larger issue than just Bahá'ís. I think
It's a big issue for us. Yes, for people to be moderate on social media.
I mean, it's more than just the Bahá'í issue. Like, I don't think that's too much of a concern. Obviously, as on an individual level, fine. Like, if you're you know, that's down to you how you consider what you consider moderation.
Well, for
Well,
example, we
yeah.
shouldn't go and support a political party on our social media and say that we're Baha'is. That's not
No, but
appropriate for a Baha'i to
That's
do
a
that.
completely different topic. We're talking about.
Yeah, and likewise how we dress. So, for example, if I were to have a shirt on that says
No,
I
but I'm
support a
talking
political
about
party,
how you present yourself. Like,
Oh, I got a comment.
talking about.
On the social media thing, what's going on in Ukraine with the Russians and building troops and the war and all this stuff that happened. One of the social media posts that I seen that I thought was encouraging, they were talking to all the young kids on both sides, and they're going, "We don't want war. We don't want this." And it's only the leader that wants it for political. So maybe a social media thing would be pointing out war isn't going to solve anything. 170,000 troops with 3,000 tanks ready to blow each other up is not a solution. So I think social media, there's a point, war doesn't work. Maybe younger people need to start voicing that. So maybe on both sides, they can put a stop to that.
We're talking about conduct.
Because that's good conduct if we can do something to help other people besides ourselves. That's just something I think that as Baha'is, we're not political, but that is just stopping the concept of killing each other without a reason. That's just something might be our religion could point that out. Because it's not a religious thing to kill each other.
in this case, you brought up how people dress, literally like how you dress, like the clothing that you're wearing. That's
No, but listen, the general point is the House of Justice says we can use the internet. The internet is a reflection of real life. We can use the internet to propagate, the rights of people and justice. And to say Baha'is aren't political, you can get involved in things which are human rights based. Like if you believe something is wrong on a human right level, that's fine. You can talk about it. But if you want to talk about partisan politics, saying Republicans are better than Democrats, this is not what Baha'is get involved in. But yeah, the general point is that
we don't get involved in that kind of
the social media has forces that influence everyone, not just Baha'is. Like Muslims have the same issue, Christians, Jews, people that are not religious. So it's more about the spiritual side. I don't think.
But the principle is that you don't dress badly. That's the principle she was bringing up. Not
I know that, but I'm saying that's not. It's not something that enemies of the faith, I think, will kind of root out, because then you could just say, all right, well, Muslims are doing the same thing, or like Christians doing the same thing. So it's just a general issue that exists that society is perverse.
We are following society, we're not following the divine law.
Yeah, society is perverse. Like I talked about this. Like music is perverse today. It's just the reality of the West and East is slowly catching up with it too.
Jeremiah, could you go to the next slide, please?
He's on the next slide.
All right, application of moral standards. So, could we have Amira to read this?
The moral standards defined in the Baha'i faith are a set of guidelines for their application to one's life. This is explained in a letter dated by the Universal House of Justice. If he is to fulfill his true mission in life as a follower of the Blessed Perfection, he will pattern his life according to the teachings. The believer cannot attain this objective merely by living according to a set of rigid regulations. When his life is oriented towards service to Baha'u'llah, and when every conscious act is performed within this frame of reference, he will not fail to achieve the true purpose of his life. Therefore, every believer must continually study the sacred writings and instructions of the beloved guardian, striving always to attain a new and better understanding of their import to him and to his society. He should pray fervently for divine guidance, wisdom, and strength to do what is pleasing to God,
and to serve him at all times and to the best of his ability.
So Payam, do you think that's the resolution for our social media issues?
I mean, we need to understand why we do what we do, and that's means studying the writings. So if you understand why you shouldn't be dressed inappropriately on social media, read the writings and see why this is important. Everything stems from studying and then applying it.
Buzz, buzz. You have a major buzz, so I couldn't hear you.
You hear that?
He's the Buzz Lightyear, John.
Only she would say that. Could you say what you said again, Payam, so I can hear you?
Which bit in your head?
The last part, you buzzed out.
So you have to study the writings to know why you should do certain things and then apply it. Because it's not just blind obedience. Like I said today in the talk, it's about we have the mature the ability to understand why certain things are the way they are and why the laws exist. Why chaste and holy life is important. We have the ability to understand this. So we just have to study it and to learn to apply it to our lives.
Can you move on to the next slide, Jeremiah? So frivolous conduct. Amira, would you like to read this?
Something is frivolous when it has no serious purpose or value. A frivolous person is an individual who is self-indulgently carefree and superficial. Frivolous conduct is lack of seriousness in one's behavior. The beloved guardian especially associates frivolous conduct with trivial and inappropriate pleasures, like Batman.
All right, frivolous conduct. If we could have anyone to read this other than Mira at this point. Soros, Rose, Scott.
I take it there's a story behind that. Frivolous conduct. Response to a question asked by a believer on the meaning of frivolous conduct. In paragraph 47, the following elucidation is provided on behalf of the Universal House of Justice. Quote, one of the signs of a decadent society, a sign which is very evident in the world today, is an almost frantic devotion to pleasure and diversion, an insatiable thirst for amusement, a fanatical devotion to game and sport, a reluctance to treat any matter seriously, and a scornful, derisory attitude towards virtue and solid worth. Abandonment of a frivolous conduct does not imply that a Baha'i must be sour-faced or perpetually solemn. Humor, happiness, joy are characteristics of a true Baha'i life. Frivolity pales, and eventually leads to boredom and emptiness. But true happiness and joy and humor that are parts of a balanced life that includes serious thought, compassion, and humble servitude to God are characteristics that enrich life and add to its radiance. Shoghi Effendi's choice of words was always significant, and each one is important in understanding his guidance. In this particular message, he does not forbid trivial pleasures, but he does warn against excessive attachment to them and indicates that they can often be misdirected one is reminded of Abdu'l-Bahá's caution that we should not let a pastime become a waste of time. Got to go back to the dictionary for a couple of these words.
So this, what word do you want to get defined, just so we can all get the definition together?
Yeah, I had one here that frivolity. Now it says Paul's. Pals.
Define frivolity.
No, pals. He means pals.
Is it P-A-L-L-S?
Oh, I think it's P. I think he meant to write pails.
Well, that's what I thought. But
I think that's supposed to be pals.
Yeah.
No,
It could be pals, because pals is like it's like a thick dust of smoke or black smoke that blinds you from things.
okay, so Paul is
A pall of black smoke hung over the quarry. So you can say frivolity palls and eventually leads to boredom. So it blinds you from what's important in life. So that's very valid word.
frivolity palls and eventually leads to boredom and emptiness. That is interesting.
It's not interesting. It's true.
It's a lot of imagery, since you just were able to find that. The imagery of that, frivolity palls, how would you describe it in an easy to describe sentence?
Well, how polls, imagine frivolity is veiling you from what's important.
Yeah,
If
so
you're-
doing all
if
these
you-
things.
If you're too sucked into like your PlayStation, for example, and you just focus on playing that for the rest of your life, and then nothing else is important, so that blinds you from the important things. I'm not.
Yeah, and here the point is that you think that this is what is fun, but fun can be many other things also. Like when you serve God, that's fun. I consider that, that brings joy and happiness to my life.
Beautiful, Amira. Beautiful. She said the right thing.
Not the PlayStation.
Very good.
not
Very
the first, it won't be the last time I'm looking up words for the Shoghi Effendi has placed in my way.
Thank you for those
Yeah.
words. It's important that we were able to look them up and get a better understanding of them for us and everyone watching. So that being said, can we move to the next slide, please, Jeremiah? Prostitution of arts and literature. Art represents various branches of human creative activities expressed through written, visual, or performing channels to share experiences, thoughts, and emotions of an artist. Over time, the arts have fulfilled various roles and have contributed significantly to the evolution of human civilization. The purpose of works of art has varied from communicating spiritual, philosophical, or political ideas to creating a sense of beauty and generating strong emotions. His Holiness Baha'u'llah states that arts, crafts, and sciences uplift the world of being and are conducive to its exaltation. In yet another tablet, Baha'u'llah states, the source of crafts, sciences, and arts is the power of reflection. Make ye every effort that out of this ideal mind there may glean forth such pearls of wisdom and utterance as will promote the well-being and harmony of all the kindreds of the earth. The statement of the beloved guardian regarding the prostitution of arts and literature in paragraph 47 reflects on the immoral exploitation of the arts as a commodity. The Universal House of Justice, in a letter dated 15 March 1972, written on its behalf, has elucidated this phrase of the guardian in this manner. As to your question about the prostitution of arts and literature, we understand by this using art and literature for debased ends. The word debased has a variety of meanings, though in this context, the most relevant are immoral, vile, or corrupt. Can you move on, Jeremiah? So the practice of nudism, covering the body in social settings, has always been a common practice in human society. In prehistoric times, animal skins and vegetable materials were used. With the evolution of human consciousness and guidance received from the divine religions, wearing clothing became an intrinsic part of being human and sign of respect and dignity. Nudism is a philosophical and political movement practicing, promoting, and defending personal and social nudity. Supporters of the movement consider nudity as the authentic human nature state with benefits of achieving and maintaining physical, mental, and spiritual health. As a social practice, both male and female generally interact freely without engaging in sexual activities. And on the right, you can see there's a image/text here. A nudist is someone who doesn't think people should feel a sense of shame about being naked or seeing other people naked. All right, next slide. So companionate marriage. Judge Benjamin Barr Lindsay, an American judge and social reformer, wrote a controversial book entitled Companionate Marriage, published in 1927, in which he suggested that young men and women should be able to live together in a trial marriage for a year to evaluate whether they match. If the relationship was not sustainable, the couple could dissolve the marriage. The couple should avoid having children during that trial period. You can see where companionate marriage has evolved into this modern day girlfriend, boyfriend, no marriage scenario. Could you move on?
I mean, it still exists. I talked about.
Yeah, companionate marriage, it still does exist, yes.
Is especially in the East and Iran. It's called muta in Iran, and it's become one form of it is a legal way of doing prostitution, actually, which is really strange.
The sireh kind of thing, right?
It's like a trial marriage, exactly this. Like many of the Muslims do it to test whether they want to marry that person or not. And we all know marriage.
John, they have sireh Iran, but in America they call it girlfriend, boyfriend.
So to continue, so to continue on this, in a letter written on behalf of the Universal House of Justice to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of Paraguay, dated 21 November 1967, a companionate marriage is compared with a traditional marriage, known as a common law marriage. The basic difference between the two categories of relationships is that common law marriage is considered by the parties concerned as a solemn contract. Now, this is common law marriage in Paraguay. Let me just make it very clear. Common law marriage in America is interpreted differently than in Paraguay, which is the letter this is addressed to. The basic difference between the two categories of relationships is that common law marriage is considered by the parties concerned as a solemn contract with the sole intention of establishing a family, but which, because of legal complications, cannot be duly registered. Whereas in companionate marriage and the like, the parties concerned initiate and maintain their relationship either on a trial basis or on other immoral grounds, both of which are condemned in our teachings. Further, we feel that by applying these principles in each of the cases you cite in your letter with wisdom, kindness, and love, you will be able to gradually educate the friends on the fundamentals of our teachings and enable them to overcome their moral difficulties. So as was described earlier during this presentation, the concept of common law marriage, which is different in different states around the world, is condemned. And in this case, for the common law marriage in Paraguay, you have this text here. But common law marriage is condemned in America, as it is not marriage that is by the authorities, like getting a marriage license to get married. If you have the opportunity to get married and the government allows you to get married, and they acknowledge the existence that you can get married and you choose not to get married, that is not good. You need to get married through the legal mechanism available. Next slide. Regarding companionate marriage and flagrant immorality, we share a letter written on behalf of the beloved guardian. The guardian has instructed me to say that companionate marriage, whether there is no legal or religious marriage, is an immoral relationship, and we cannot accept as believers those who are openly behaving in this way. And this is again to the NSA of Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay, dated September 26, 1957. If we could please have the next slide, and if Soros, you could read it. Infidelity. Until Soros comes. In paragraph 47, the beloved guardian is referring to infidelity in marriage. The word infidelity means being unfaithful and disloyal. Infidelity in a marriage means that one or both of the partners engages in an intimate and sexual relationship with someone outside the marriage. Next slide. In the Baha'i teachings, fidelity and faithfulness are critical characteristics of a chaste and holy life. In a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to an individual dated 28 September 1941, this point is emphasized. The question you raised as to the place in one's life that a deep bond of love with someone we meet other than our husband or wife can have is easily defined in view of the teachings. Chastity implies both before and after marriage, an unsullied, chaste sex life. Before marriage, absolutely chaste. After marriage, absolutely faithful to one's chosen companion. Faithful in all sexual acts, faithful in word and in deed. So promiscuity. Soros, are you able to read this one? Or we could have Scott, would you like to read this one?
Sure. Promiscuity represents the indiscriminate practice of engaging in intimate and sexual relationships with different partners. What distinguishes promiscuity from other sexual behaviors in its casual nature. A promiscuous individual is characterized by transient, unselective, and indiscriminate sexual behavior. Promiscuous behavior is very common today, and there are places and opportunities to meet others for such transient relationships. In a letter written on behalf of the guardian, he references modern dance halls where promiscuity takes place. Quote, in the teachings, there is nothing against dancing, but the friends should remember that the standard of Baha'u'llah is modesty and chastity. The atmosphere of modern dance halls, where so much smoking and drinking and promiscuity goes on, is very bad, but decent dances are not harmful in themselves. There is certainly no harm in classical dancing or learning dancing in school. There is also no harm in taking part in dramas, likewise in cinema acting. The harmful thing nowadays is not the art itself, but the unfortunate corruption which often surrounds these arts. As Baha'is, we need to avoid none of the arts, but acts and the atmosphere that sometimes goes with these professions we should avoid. Easy familiarity. In modern English, one of the meanings of familiarity is relaxed, friendly, informal, and intimate behavior. In Middle English, that being around 1150 to 1470, the word familiarity conveyed sexual intimacy and close relationship. This seems to be the context in which Shoghi Effendi has used the term in paragraph 47. As far as the Baha'i writings are concerned, this is the only reference made to the specific term easy familiarity in the published authoritative works. An unpublished letter to an individual written on behalf of the Universal House of Justice and dated the 5th of February, 1992, provides some elucidation on easy familiarity. Quote, as you know, in the advent of divine justice, Shoghi Effendi has stated that the principles of Baha'i conduct, Certainly the practice of indiscriminate kissing and embracing involving unrelated people of opposite sexes is not desirable and is discouraged, particularly in these days when restraints are being abolished one by one. The Baha'is should make great effort to uphold in their personal lives and in their relationships to each other the standard of conduct set forth in the teachings. Sexual vices. Vice is a behavior that is immoral and wicked. It can also include criminal activities such as prostitution, pornography, or drugs, or habits that are not criminal but immoral and unacceptable. Vice more specifically reflects a practice that is ingrained in an individual as a habit. Sexual vices are habits that considered diversions to natural expression of the sex impulse. Sexual vices such as masturbation may be personal and affect the spiritual health of an individual without any impact on others. There are other sexual vices such as sexual violence and pedophilia that can harm others, and society treats them as criminal acts. Chastity. In traditional religions, the concept of chastity implies that sexual relationships are acceptable when performed within the framework of marriage between wife and husband. All sexual acts outside marriage are explicitly condemned. In Catholicism, chastity is considered the opposite of lust, which is classified as one of the 7 deadly sins, others being pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. In marriage, wife and husband are expected to commit to a lifelong relationship with fidelity, excluding sexual intimacy with other people. Quote from quoted by the House of Justice says, one speck of chastity is greater than 100,000 years of worship in a sea of knowledge. Another on chastity in paragraph 48, His Holiness Baha'u'llah said that the worldly pleasures and delights are, in the sight of God, as worthless as dust and ashes. Pass beyond your evil and corrupt desires, as your own lusts hinder you from entering the straight and glorious path. Eschew all manner of wickedness. A race of men with great character shall be raised up, which with the feet of detachment will cast the sleeve of holiness over all that hath been created from clay or from water and clay. If allowed, science will overleap the bounds of moderation and bring evil upon men. He must inhale the fragrance of sanctity, and if he met the fairest and most beautiful woman, he would not feel his heart seduced by the least shadow of desire for her. Those who follow their lusts and corrupt desires are of the lost. Baha'u'llah has made chastity to be a crown for the heads of his handmaidens. If God perceives from you acts of purity and holiness, he will most certainly bless you. Paragraph 49, His Holiness Baha'u'llah Abdul Baha writes that drinking of wine or alcohol is forbidden, for it is the cause of chronic diseases, weakens the nerves, and consumes the mind. We should become intoxicated with the wine of the love of God and not with that which deadens your minds. In denouncing asceticism, in paragraph 50, the beloved guardian emphasizes that the high moral standards laid down in the teachings of the faith should not be confused with any form of asceticism or of excessive and bigoted Puritanism. In asceticism, an individual abstains from physical pleasure in the belief that he will grow spiritually and attain salvation. There are different degrees of asceticism. In extreme cases, the individual completely withdraws from society and lives in isolation. In other forms, the ascetic remains in society but renounces material possessions and physical pleasures. Historically, asceticism has been practiced by minority groups in all traditional religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And asceticism is a noun, comes from the Greek word askesis, meaning exercise or training, a lifestyle characterized by abstinence from sensual pleasures, often for the purpose of pursuing spiritual goals.
I'll go ahead and pick up here, Scott. Thank you.
Sure.
We have a few more slides and then we're done with this. So I'm just gonna read through them and then we can have a minute or so of discussion. His Holiness Baha'u'llah explicitly states, living in seclusion or practicing asceticism is not acceptable in the presence of God. It behooveth them that are endowed with insight and understanding to observe that which will cause joy and radiance. Such practices as are sprung from the loins of idle fancy or are begotten of the womb of superstition ill beseem men of knowledge. In former times and more recently, some people have been taking up their abodes in the caves of the mountains, while others have repaired to graveyards at night. Say, give ear unto the counsels of this wrong one, abandon the things current amongst you, and adopt that which the faithful counselor biddeth you. Deprive not yourselves of the bounties which have been created for your sake. His Holiness Abdul Baha explains that the teachings of the faith do not imply that one should give up avocation and attainment to livelihood. On the contrary, in the cause of Baha'u'llah's Montasinism and asceticism are not sanctioned. In this great cause, the light of guidance is shining and radiant. Baha'u'llah has even said that occupation and labor are devotion. All humanity must obtain a livelihood by sweat of the brow and bodily exertion, at the same time seeking to lift the burden of others, striving to be the source of comfort to souls and facilitating the means of living. This in itself is devotion to God. Baha'u'llah has thereby encouraged action and stimulated service. But the energies of the heart must not be attached to these things. The soul must not be completely occupied with them. Though the mind is busy, the heart must be attracted towards the kingdom of God in order that the virtues of humanity may be attained from every direction and source. Stop this share. Right. Well, we ran over about 10 minutes. I appreciate everyone hanging on there. And I think now would be a good time. I'll pull up is there any last minute discussions on those last couple of slides? You're muted, John.
No, I think that it's a good idea we go to the closing prayer and we can definitely reflect on all this material.
It's a lot of material, that's for sure. All right. So give me a second.
How's your nap, Jeremiah?
He asked you, how's your nap? All right, Amira, please.
Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change not into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent, and the door of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. It's nice to see everyone.
Definitely.
Good seeing you again, Pam.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And Scott and Soros and Rose, thank you everyone for making this a productive session that definitely needs a lot more discussion than what we had, but
Sure.
we're very happy.
Bye.
All right.